rule, like the moral principle, like I just say respect the elder or something like that.
That's not a problem.
No, but if you say I respect your mother, and then I come to you, you need to give me $100 or something like that. However, there is no rule specify that I must respect your father. You see, I try to deceive you. I respect your mother. I come there to take care of him every day. You should give me $100 or something like that. You see, if you trust me, and my deception is successful, that's your problem. You see, I do a misbehavior, and I make you a deception.
I think that's not a good example for the case. I think, for example, when you have a project, we had some fraud that we have a project they're going to build a school, and then some companies they can say we already installed the light, and they didn't. You meant the case that they have evidence that you installed the light, but they did not install it. So that's the ontic fraud, because my obligation I consider it fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I have the evidence.
Yes.
And they haven't fulfilled it.
Okay.
That's the ontic fraud, right?
Sure.
Non-deontic fraud is what they do in Nicaragua. Some companies, they say, oh, we are going to install $500 doors, and they install $100 doors. That's not deontic, because it's fraud, but it's not deontic, right? It's a different type of fraud.
Well, what I suggest, you leave it like this, and then you say, this may be all fraud, but we're using deontic fraud as a working term. In case there's some other kinds of fraud we haven't thought about.
Okay.
Okay. For instance, there is the case of the so-called big lie.
Yeah.
Stalin made a point that if you make a lie that's big enough, people will eventually believe you, because it couldn't possibly, it's on such a huge scale. He made the case that everybody in the country has got enough to eat. There were millions that starved to death, but he just rejected that. He said, no, that's wrong. Because that couldn't be true, because everybody has enough to eat. And he kept repeating that until everybody had enough to eat, and the ones that didn't died.
Today,
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The ones that didn't have enough to eat died, and so they were no longer part of everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. But
But the point, this is a minor point, and you got to keep it minor. Don't let it get away from you.
Actually,
right, we're thinking, our ambition is all kinds of fraud, and there may be others, but we're just focusing on, we're defining this. This is our working definition.
But it's not minor. That's the key focus of his research.
It's deontic fraud, but there's a difference between deontic fraud
and
other fraud. Whatever else is there, we're not quite sure if there is anything else there.
Right.
But in case there is, we're not dealing with it.
Well,
but I'm very sure if we analyze into these elements, I'm very sure misbehavior, deception count as a fraud. Misbehavior governed by rule, misbehavior not governed by rule.
Say it this way. There's the ordinary terminology. And not to get confused with the ordinary sense, it's like if you're trying to talk about trust, for instance. There's an ordinary sense of trust. But anybody that's working on trust has to give it a working definition, because there's too many other interpretations. Similarly with fraud, we're using this term deontic fraud as a specific working definition. So we don't contend with the popular definition of fraud.
Okay, that's what it is.
So we don't try to encompass all other uses of fraud. We're giving it this specific use.
Yeah. So having said about fraud, here is the controls against the fraud. So you see the objective of the research is the control, but we need to discuss fraud at the other side, another viewpoint. So the controls are mechanisms that are partly try to limit the risk of the ontic fraud, because the target here is now on the ontic fraud. And so the control here is also a working definition of control. It's not a control in the general sense, like the control of the workload, you need to go this way or go that way and so forth. This is the specific working definition of control. That is mechanism that are try to limit the risk of the ontic fraud. And in organizational business, control are typically achieved via documentary procedure. The reason because deontic fraud usually takes place on documentary procedure that we just discussed before. For example, there's a number of the international trade procedures that are developed in order to prevent against deontic risk. For instance, the documentary credit procedure is a very famous procedure in international trade in order to limit the opportunistic behavior of the participant involved in international trade. An escrow procedure is also the same kind of procedure that try to prevent the party behave opportunistically in a trading transaction. So here, I probably remove this thing because it's a little bit more about the taxonomies of control. I'm looking at like two steps of control present in the procedure. The first step of control is what I temporarily call the contractual control. Thus, we control misbehavior between the two trading parties. The second one, I call the regulatory control, is to monitor the relationship or to control the relationship between a trading party and a government authority. The reason is that in the contractual control, the control is implemented based on negotiation between the two parties. When we enter into the contract, we negotiate and implement certain kind of control. With the regulatory control, is a little bit different. It's enforced by the government or the authority officer in order to control the society in general.
Above these last 2 points, you can say dimensions.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. So preceding those 2 points, you say dimensions of control. First, the first bullet is source of control.
Yeah.
And the second bullet is purpose of control.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that way you could imagine a 2x3 matrix and something like that. Okay.
Right.
Keep going.
Right. And for the...
That's enough detail. Next
okay.
slide. Because you're way over time. Wu, your talk is going way too slow.
Yeah, sure, we discuss it.
I know. I know, but I don't want you dwelling on details.
Okay.
Quick question. Administrative control. Are all these controls you talked about all administrative controls, or are you saying, well, contractual is administrative and regulatory is not, or are you define all of these
as
controls?
opposed to production control, as opposed to quality control, as opposed to biological control.
Okay, so you're not saying regulatory are not administrative, they are. You're just giving elaboration of administrative control.
Right. I try to elaborate what what administrative control means by this kind of thing. It falls into this category. Okay, and what is the control requirement? The control requirement is the statement about the design goal of the control. So a control requirement specifies an obligation. That's different with the contractual obligation. The contractual obligation, you have an obligation to do something for some other one. And when you violate, the other one has the right to sanction you, has the power to sanction you. However, in case of control, you import the control for your own benefit. You should do it for your own benefit. And if you violate the control, then you are vulnerable to the risk of fraud. So element of control requirement include what control activity, who enforce the control or who do the control activity, and when. That is the point in the procedure, when we should have the control in running procedure and the documentary procedure. Example of the control requirement, like after receiving goods, after delivering goods to the carrier, the seller should have evidence of the delivery and so forth. The control requirement can be satisfied by different controls, and reversibly, a control can at the same time satisfy many control requirements. And the example is again the bioplating, for instance. And the bioplating satisfies a number of control requirements. It's evidence of the rights evidence of the delivery of goods, and so forth. And the same thing, a control can certify, right, that's the example is a control certify many control requirements, right? And a control requirement can be certified by many different control solutions or control in general. For instance, the